Hey everybody, welcome to We've Got Ward, a Doof Media podcast series where we expertly dissect and discuss Ward, Wildbow's return to the world of parahumans. My name is Matt Freeman.
And I'm Scott Daly.
Mail's here.
This is the weekly podcast where Matt and I eagerly dive into Wildbow's world of reading your questions, answering your questions, and alien-based death powers as we analyze and interpret this ongoing web serial. We're coming to you this week from the past. Ooh. I hope everyone is having a fantastic and fabulous September 25th. I am currently down in Austin on the second to last day of Fantastic Fest, so we are recording this episode way early. But I bet I've seen a bunch of good movies, and I'm feeling pretty happy right now, Matt. That's what I think I'm gonna stake that, make that Scott speculation. And I'm feeling pretty good.
Hi, this is Matt from the present. I've been reading your Twitter account for this last week, and you really have been having a good time at that festival. So,
that's great to hear.
Yeah.
I'm glad the realm of podcasting allows us to open up time portals and speak to each other from different moments in time. It's really an underplayed value of podcasting.
Well, that's all I had to say. Anyway, have a good week. Later.
Okay, bye.
All right, it's me again.
Okay. As we have indicated this week on the show, we are pressing pause on our discussion of From Within, which could, that arc could be over by the time you're hearing this. I don't know, but we are going to answer some of your wonderful mailbaggy questions. So thanks to everyone for taking the time to send in some questions. We wanted to give you some content for this week, even though we were going to be out. So we thought we would do this and have some fun. So thanks for participating. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
But first, a brief reminder, Matt.
Brief reminder, fan art contest with the theme of reflections. The entries are due September 30th at midnight Pacific Standard Time. Check out the official rules in the show notes below.
So that's for you people in the future. That's 5 days from the day you're hearing this on the 25th of September.
That's right. Time is fascinating. All right, let's get into these questions, Scott. I haven't even really looked at these. You did me the favor of collecting them, so
yeah, I do what I can. That just means your answers are going to be really intelligent.
Yeah, well, they're going to be from the heart is what they're going to be.
That's true.
And that's what you come here for is our earnest feelings about things. So first of all, from Kippos, Matt has mentioned before that reading Wildbow's works made him update his stance on fates worse than death. With this in mind, how has reading Wildbow's works changed your perspectives / personal philosophies on life?
Every way possible. That's not quite true. I don't know, Matt. What do you think?
Definitely. I called myself a utilitarian for a long time, and I tried to live as a utilitarian, like having utilitarianism be my governing life philosophy. Like I would try to think through the decisions that I made on a day-to-day basis in terms of like estimated magnitude of harm versus benefit, and like it wasn't all. It had some negative consequences, but it had some positive consequences. Like I was actually a vegetarian for a couple of years, literally due to like just thinking through the problem and being like, you know what, I really can't justify this in an ethical sense. And eventually I stopped that for health reasons. But the point is, like, I was way into that. And Wildbow's stories have really just shown me so many different angles on different people in different situations, different ways of approaching things, and then the process of talking about it and analyzing it for the podcast. Also, I've just had to like turn these things over in my head over and over until I just kind of until you like the idea of utilitarianism as a personal philosophy just sort of broke for me, and that's not at all. I don't even try to do that anymore. So that's probably the biggest, like, most obvious personal philosophy change that it has done to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always prided myself on being an empathetic person. But I've also never really like just in your day-to-day life, like how often do you actually have to put that to the test, right?
Right.
I mean, outside of just, oh, this person at work is annoying me, you don't really have to do that. But I think that reading this book and not just reading it, like you said, the manner in which we read it forced me to really think for a long time about people and what the battles people are having inside themselves and what they're going through. So I won't say it's like a really dramatic philosophy shift for me, but I do find myself, just when I see people suffering or when I see someone that's annoying me or behaving in a certain way, I go to what is their story before I go to, I don't like this person.
Absolutely. Yeah. The idea, like I'll kind of half jokingly talk about people having trigger events in real life. And what I really mean is like something happened to you that changed you in a specific way. And that's true of almost everyone in a million tiny ways and usually in a handful of bigger ways. So, we don't have one trigger event, we have a whole bunch, but I find it to be a very useful lens of having empathy with people and getting to a place of being able to forgive and contextualize their actions.
I do think it also challenged me a lot on my, I don't like calling myself a deontologist, but my deontological leanings, I think it challenged that, like it challenged your utilitarian. I think it challenged me on that a little bit. And I think that's kind of the beauty of the story, is just this ability to like, look, maybe your philosophy that you prescribe to is not 100% the right way to do things always. And maybe you need to live in that shade of gray, and maybe you need to be made uncomfortable with what this thing is telling you. And there were times reading this book where I was like, geez, I don't know if I like what this is saying, but I have to deal with it. I have to face it. I have to recognize the truth in that where it is and explore what that means, both within the terms of the story, but what it means personally within me.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah. Great question, Kippos. I like that a lot. All right. Next up, we have Samuel, who asks, do you ever think when you started Worm, it would ever become such a big part of your life? Matt?
No, I'm, I mean, I started it because Daniel incepted me, my brother, and I loved it so much. I think that I've talked about this before enough times on the podcast, but after I finished reading it, I just kind of had that like post-Worm craving for more Worm, and so I like spent time in the community and posted on the subreddit for a while, and I noticed after a long time that I just I kept hanging around the subreddit, and I'm not really someone who spends a lot of time on Reddit like generally, so I was like, why am I it's been like a year since I read this story, why am I still hanging around the subreddit? And I was like, I just goddamn love this story. So that was the thing that kind of led to it being, kind of so salient in my mind that I would want to suggest it as the topic for a whole podcast show. But it's interesting because it kind of took on life of its own for me, and then that led to us making the decision to make the show. And of course, your engagement with it has been different. The reason I kind of just took over there is because you and I both had utterly incomparably different introductions to the story.
Sure.
And so I felt like it was worth it to just say like, yeah, that's how I got into it. And for me, it was more like I couldn't get it out of my life, so I decided I might as well intentionally make it part of my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I like that a lot. From my side, like my answer to this is kind of yes and no. It's no in the I never ever thought that almost 3 years later we'd still be talking about this world and talking about it with the number of people we're talking about it with and participating in in the community in the way that we are. But I also like have to recognize that like I came to read this book with the idea that we were going to do a arc by arc show on it. So I knew it was going to be a big part of my life for the 9 months or whatever it took to go through it. That being said, I had no idea what we were doing. Like I did, like you told me how long the story was. We even wrote like a tentative, this is how long we think, like this is how many episodes we think this is going to go on for.
Right.
But like that's like in my head at the time, we had never done a show like this. It was so abstract and like I just had no concept of how much I was actually signing myself up for time wise with this thing. And of course it just kept like getting bigger and bigger and longer. And that's as a result of the story doing that same thing. But so while I knew I was getting into something that was going to take a lot of my life, I could never have guessed how much just time commitment wise it would. But yeah, I mean, even beyond that, the people we've met, the interactions we've had, the conversations and debates and fights sometimes we've had over what we think the story is saying and doing. And never in my wildest dreams would I have figured that would happen.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that's, I've never said out loud personally is like, I didn't know that we liked to talk about things like in that level of detail.
Yeah.
Like we had the Daily Planet podcast before that, and that would be like an hour and a half of discussion about a movie or whatever, and those are good. I stand by those.
Yeah.
But like this show revealed like, oh, we really do enjoy like we'll gladly talk about 2 chapters for 2 hours.
Yep.
and that's great. And I know that this is a fact that I didn't necessarily know about myself before I did it, you know?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we had never done that before. Not even close. We had never done anything comparable to this at all.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was, I'm so happy we enjoy doing it.
Yeah,
or
right.
else this would have been a long 3 years.
Yeah. Or the episodes would have been really short and not
Sure.
Yeah. They would have been different. Samuel has a bonus question. Would you rather have a katana or a broadsword?
Katana. 100%.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Obviously. Manukos says, I have heard Scott talk about Buffy the Vampire Slayer countless times, comparing it to properties I really love. Yes. That makes me interested to check it out. But everyone online says that the first season is terrible. Do you disagree? Think it holds up? Why? Do you have a watching guide to recommend?
Okay. Yeah, the first season's not good. And I like the first season, but I like the first season because I like the characters and I like seeing where the characters started out and seeing how they transform through that first season and how the show transforms to the good show, the wonderful, great, one of my favorite shows of all time it is. But I fully copped to the fact that the first season is clunky. And it's just because a lot of it is just TV shows finding their groove, finding, the correct level of tone, of how much camp do you want, how much serious drama do you want. And the first 11 episodes were really just trying to figure that out. It was also a mid-season replacement, so it was like put together pretty quickly. It was very, very low budget, so the effect stuff, which is always kind of a challenge in the early seasons, was in the first season really, really bad. And it's just some clunky writing, but the soul of the show, I think, is there. And I think there are episodes in the first season worth watching. That question about do you have a watching guide? I talked about it on the podcast this last week, actually. There's a YouTube channel called Passion of the Nerd, and basically he's doing a episode by episode deep dive exploration and video essay on every single one of the episodes. He also does a video called titled why you should watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And he basically points out that there are 4 episodes in the first season you absolutely 100% need to watch, and you can skip the rest of them if you really need to do it. I would never suggest skipping episodes just because I'm like a purist that way. But if you really just can't stand them in the first season, but you think you will end up liking the show later, and you will, trust me, Passion of the Nerd has the 4 episodes you need to see, and you can watch the video summaries of the other ones if you don't want to, or you can just not. It's a serialized television show, but in the way of old TV, so it is not like every episode advances the plot. Some episodes can be easily tossed away without really losing anything. So I love it. I love the show. It's so good. It's such a great, wonderful example of all the things I love about storytelling. The writing is very sharp. The characters are drawn beautifully. The way the plots weave around this central theme of high school is hell. I could talk about the show forever. I won't though, because there's one more question for Matt.
No, I'm sorry I zoned out because you're talking about Buffy.
Damn it.
The second question was, Matt, have you seen it? And what do you make of Scott's insistence to bring it up at every opportunity? Well, no, I haven't seen it. What I make of his insistence to bring it up is that it's probably really good and I'd probably really like it. And I just haven't gotten around to it. And
yeah,
it's hard for me to make time to watch things unless someone writes it on a calendar for me, which I guess is why Scott started to do that for me. You know, what Scott may or may not realize is that if he just put on a calendar, like, yeah, we're doing a podcast about season 1 of Buffy on this day, then I would just be like, oh, okay, I guess I'll have to watch it.
Fuck. What have you done? You know that's going to happen now.
Yeah, I mean,
I do agree that this is a time commitment show, right? Because this is back in the time of 22 episode seasons, hour-long episodes. That's a lot. That's a lot.
And it's 7 seasons.
Yeah,
so yeah, that's 144 episodes. I Googled it while you were talking, actually. Mm-hmm. So that's a lot of episodes. So it is something that needs to be watched over a period of time. That's for sure.
Yeah. And I don't mean to bring it up constantly. I just think when I look back at you know, the thing that formed me into the person that I am, that loves storytelling and loves what stories can do, it is watching and experiencing the show that does it. So whenever I'm really passionate and I really enjoy something, my brain just makes that mental connection. Like, it just does it for me, because it's like, oh, this reminds me of a thing that I really loved, and this thing that was paramount to why I am the person I am now. And so I think that just kind of happens. I mean, Matt did it with Worm like all the damn time before we watched Worm.
Yeah, I was just going to say, no, I never bring things up over and over in different contexts.
Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty. Next question. Coinage says, I've been catching up and it's hard to believe y'all have passed 100 episodes now.
I know.
Just for kicks, I went back and re-listened to the first episode, and boy, was it different. Knowing what you know now of Worm and Ward, and applying a similar focus or approach to Worm as you do to Ward, is there anything you would target or change if you were to do a hypothetical reread?
I think I would change how we divided up the sections. So I think we've talked about this before. I don't remember. We talk about things so many times I forget where we said them. But I think Worm was probably too much content per episode. I think Ward, as much as I love doing it, might be too little. So I think there's a sweet spot in the middle of those. So if I were going to do a reread and do something show-wise on a reread, I would probably want my chunks to be a little bit smaller. Not Worm sized, but maybe like halfway in between. But I mean, one of the other things I would want to do on a reread, one of the things I've been fascinated about, and one of the most contentious subjects, is my interpretation of Taylor as it compares to a large number of the community's interpretation of Taylor. And what I would want to do on a reread is I would want to go into that reread consciously with like, okay, let's try to see Taylor the way other people see Taylor. And let's see how the book speaks to me when I approach it with that specific goal in mind. I think that would be a very interesting project. Yeah. I don't know what would come out of it. I don't know if it would change my opinion. It might, but I think that would be interesting to do.
Yeah, that sounds interesting, actually. I just can't answer this question because I think, honestly, there is no such thing as an optimal level of resolution, an optimal level of granularity. Like,
sure,
there are people who do read-throughs on their blogs or what have you, on Tumblr or whatever, where they are literally going line by line. They're copying out a line of text,
sure,
and then they're giving their reaction to it, and that's some people's thing, totally. And then there's hypothetical podcast where you read a whole arc and then you talk about it for half an hour, and you touch on like 3 of the things that happened. Like, oh yeah, man, wasn't it cool when Echidna got cut in half by the spider silk? Yeah, that was badass, man. All right, that was a good episode, so like,
sure.
but like, I don't think there's an optimum between those two extremes. I think that different people have different tastes as listeners, and we have a certain proclivity as talkers.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we're pretty close to where our own like dynamic has formed a set point of like, this is how much we want to talk about a given amount of text,
Yeah, I think having a little bit more of it allows you to see the curve of the arc a little bit more, that when you dive so deep into the weeds, you like lose sight of those specific curves of the overall arc of the story.
Certainly.
And I think if I had more time, like if I had an infinite number of time, I would just reread every chapter in the arc in a specific arc before I do each episode, and so I would be able to remember all those beats. But sometimes, like, you go back to arc 1 of even this arc we're on currently. It was like a month ago.
Yeah.
It's a long time ago. So it's like I haven't gone back and read those chapters in the detail we did the first time, and I don't have time. Like I would love to maybe even just like go back and listen to all our old episodes, each arc, to refresh myself of what we talked about. But I don't have time to do that either. So it's just like maybe just little bit bigger chunks would allow us to see that curve a little bit more, that we wouldn't have to go back and do that. I don't know.
I think the way we do the book club proves that you're right about that, because when we're reading a book for book club, it's all in 1 month. We talk about the whole book. Yeah. And we can say so much more about what we think the themes are, what we think the author is saying, with a lot more certainty and a lot more thoroughness and completeness, because we have the whole book in front of us, especially when it's not part of a series. And it's just, that's the book.
Yeah. I mean, with Worm, we cut it off at 60,000 words, right? If the arc was longer than 60,000 words, we divided it into 2 episodes. With Ward, depending on how long the chapters are, they're anywhere from like 8 to 10,000 words each, right? Usually. Yeah. So we're at under 20,000. When I'm thinking of like the Dark Tower podcast that we're doing, right now, we're very close to hitting that goal. So I'm like doing preliminary work to divide up the books into sections. I'm looking at around 40,000 words and seeing, which parts in the story make sense to divide it around that number. And we're just going to kind of see. Like, I think the thing is with anything we do, it's really just, let's give it a shot and see how it goes. And if it's working, great. If not, we'll adjust it a little bit. I think we've got Ward is a show of that, where we've kind of made we haven't really changed up like the entire like format, but we have made micro adjustments along the way when we saw things were or were not working.
Yep. True. We made some pretty big changes, didn't we? Yeah.
All right. Next up, we have Ty, who asks, what's the deal with Superman? I don't know if he wanted to do that in a Jerry Seinfeld voice, but because Jerry Seinfeld loves Superman, I thought that was perfect. Why do you like him so much? He's always fallen flat for me because he has the luxury of being powerful enough to live up to his own moral code, which makes him the opposite of interesting or inspiring. As an example, if you replace Victoria with Superman in the teacher raid, when they get to the bit where Victoria kills the leper, Supes could just freeze him, fly him really fast to a secure location, and then come back and continue the raid. But that's not a moral victory. That's a thank God I won the power lottery and don't have to compromise my principles victory. So what am I missing here? What makes Superman interesting to you? This is kind of a me question. Because I don't think you like Superman as much as I do.
Not as much as you do, no.
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing. Like, we've kind of touched on this before, but I love to talk about Superman. I completely agree with you that in the situation you just outlined, Superman's presence in that scene over Victoria's would not make for as compelling of a story. But I think the thing about Superman, and the reason why people have such a hard time writing him, is because you can't do the same kind of stuff. It has to be different kind of fights. It has to be different kind of conflict. The thing I love about Superman is that he is the most powerful being on the planet. He could do anything he wants. He doesn't have to be beholden to anything. He could do or be or get anything he wants to get at any time. And yet he chooses to be a good person. He chooses to spend his life helping people. He chooses to not grasp that power. And to me, that is the inspiring part about him. A being that is so strong that they don't have to be beholden to any of anything in our world, any of the rules, laws, requirements, social understandings, general morality. They don't have to abide by any of those things. And yet he does. And a person that powerful who remains that essentially human is something that's incredible to me. And I think I said this, I'm just going to repeat myself, but the thing about Superman is he does the things we cannot, which inspire us to do the things we can. Like his ability to be this all-powerful person that makes those choices, I think inspires me and inspires other people to make the choices in our lives that we can, to do the right thing in our situations, because he is a person who doesn't have to do any of that and yet chooses to do it anyway.
Cool.
And I think that's really hard to write in a story where people are punching each other. I do. I think it's really tough.
Yeah.
So I I'm not even sure what the right way to write Superman is. I think All-Star Superman, the comic, is my standby go-to, because that is a comic where Superman finds out he is dying and just spends the entirety of the comic like trying to do his best to put the world in as good enough of a place after he leaves it, where he's like, at least he can rest knowing the world is going to be okay. And it really mostly focuses on him trying to repair relationships and help people and give people the tools they need to protect themselves after he's gone. And I don't know, I just love that idea. I just love that central story. And I've always been like the Boy Scouty type of comic book character. I love Captain America. I think he's great. I love Superman. I love the goody two shoes type characters that are just gonna be the ones that do the right thing, the sticks in the mud. You know, I like those characters.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm reminded of I think someone made this comment in like a We've Got Worm Reddit thread or something, where they pointed out that Scion is the example of what happens to Superman when he doesn't have his humanity, when he doesn't have that Clark Kent side. And so like it really emphasized to me, like it made something click for me about Superman. Yeah. I'm not as crazy about Superman as Scott is, but I that comment kind of crystallized the appeal of Superman as like, yeah, he is this ultimate being, but he has this kernel of humanity, and that's actually what allows you to connect to him. And I think that's like you were saying, that's where the good Superman stories come from. I think all the punching Superman stories are the worst ones, definitely. Yeah.
It's like, you know, in Kill Bill 2, where Bill has this whole speech about Superman and how Clark Kent is actually his alternate identity.
Yeah.
I think that's bullshit. I think Clark Kent is who he is. Yeah. He is fundamentally Clark Kent, and that is what makes him Superman. That is the most important thing. And I think that's what the great Superman stories really explore, that his central Clark Kentness is what makes him who he is. And I love it.
Yeah, yeah. All right, next question from Julio. Your various podcasts have been a source of enjoyment and structure for me during this time, like reading comics and reading Ward. The dependability of podcast episodes have been really helpful in maintaining my sanity and keeping track of my goals. You can't know how thankful I am to you for all this. Now for the question.
Yeah, that wasn't the question, but I want to leave that in because thank you, Julio. That was so nice.
Yeah, we really appreciate that. I checked your Patreon. Sorry, I can't contribute. I'm saving every penny to go to study in the U.S. next year. Congratulations.
That's awesome.
And saw one of your goals is a fiction podcast written by Matt. That's so exciting. Anything you can tell us about its content, length? Are you hiring actors? Will you pay Wildbow to guest write an episode?
We would love to, Wildbow. Yeah, we can't talk too much about it, Matt. It is an audio podcast narrative thing, right?
It's not just written by me. It was written by me, Scott, and Michael.
Yeah, I think I need to change that because when I wrote that in the Patreon thing, nobody on the Patreon knew who Michael was, so it wouldn't make sense to put his name on there, so I just had your name, but I need to add that, yeah. Primarily written by Matt and Michael. I contributed a little bit, but it's their baby for sure.
That's such horseshit, Scott.
Come on, you developed the concept.
We developed the concept, but I think that you wrote just as much of the actual. So I think we can say like we have actual scripts written for it. It's there's a lot of logistics and just planning and decisions to be made before it gets produced. And this is not something that we have any experience with. So,
this is all new for us.
Yeah. So going from a script to an actual produced podcast, big hurdle for us, actually.
Yeah, I mean, just going from a rough draft of a script to a final, ready to be produced draft of a script is a pretty big hurdle for us. But all the rest of it, the length, I think we're at like 10 episodes. I mean, that's something that's going to change so much as we finalize the script and see what the actual length of each episode is going to fall out to be. But our plan is to hire actors, to hire people. I mean, that's kind of why we put the goal at where it's at, which is like our highest level goal, because we knew that this thing is going to cost a lot of money to do. Just to produce it is going to be very expensive. And so we wanted to make sure that when we got to the point where we were saying and committing to doing it, we wanted to make sure we had enough money to be able to actually do it and do it well. So yeah, we're definitely going to do all that stuff. And as we get closer to it and as like we continue to work on refine it, we'll kind of start talking about it more publicly, but it's cool. It's a fun concept. It's a fun idea. Lots of fun characters.
Yeah. I think it's going to be good. But we we're not close to releasing that. It's fun to talk about, but we avoid talking about it because it's then like people start asking about it, and it's like we're not even close to being at the point of being able to answer concrete questions about this thing. So
Yeah.
But thanks for the interest though.
Yeah, that's cool. We haven't really talked about that much. We just kind of threw that up there, and we're just really quiet about it. Because first of all, when we threw that goal up there, I was like, we're never gonna get there.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh God, we're so close to getting there.
I know. It's crazy. Julio has another question. They say, in a related subject, what are your long-term plans for Doof Media? More podcasts, other stuff? And they say, I've listened to enough Vow to View to get that Scott wants to eventually leave his day job. I'm not sure what Matt does for a living. Is it a secret? What is your vision for the company in 5 years? Wow.
The Netflix of podcasts.
The Amazon Prime of podcasts. The Twitter of podcasts.
I don't even know.
No.
We do not have like a set, like formalized long-term business plan type of thing. We want to keep growing. We want to keep trying out new stuff. I think one of the big goals for 2019 for us, I think, was to bring other people into this organization and bring other shows into it. And I think we've succeeded at that goal. We have our guys from Deep Impact. We have the guys from Do the Right Thing. We'd like to continue to do that. One of our other big goals is networking. We want to start getting to know the podcasting community. There's a lot of people that do these kind of story analysis shows. We want to get to know those people, and we want to become friends with those people and talk with those people and have them as guest stars on our stuff. So that's one of our big goals. I would love for this to be my full-time job. I would love it. We are a long way away from that.
Yeah. I mean, well before we ever even had the idea of doing a podcast together, I've wanted to be like an independent entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And be my own boss, etc. And I'm an engineer. That is my job. So that is fairly different from literary analysis / media personality, whatever.
Sure. Content creator.
Whatever. Yeah. But I would also love to do this for a living. But like Scott said, it's it's so far from where we are now that it's just kind of a fun thing to think about, really.
Yeah. I mean, I have not taken any steps or made any plans towards that in any kind of real way other than pipe dream. But I mean, for the short-term achievable goals, we want to keep growing. We want to keep exploring. We want to find some other shows out there that maybe match with us and bring them in and help them kind of help us while helping them. Did that sentence make sense?
Yeah, sure.
We want to be able to do more shows, but not just podcasts. We've been looking into video stuff, and I know some of the Media MD guys have some video ideas of stuff they want to explore. So we just kind of want to keep true to what has always been true for us, which is keep making the stuff we really like making and not being afraid to chase an interesting idea that we have.
Yep.
And that's kind of been the secret to our success, I guess. And it's allowed us to always make things that we like, and it turns out other people like as well. So, I mean, it's not like, maybe we should like sit down, Matt, and have like an actual like 5-year plan ironed out. I don't know. I don't even know what that would look like at this point, but
right. Yeah. My 5-year plan is for us both to be working full time for Doof Media.
There we go.
There
we go.
Now we just have to fill in the 5 years, and
let's just increase our download number by 8,000%, and maybe we'll be there.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
You know what we need? I mean, here's my 5-year plan: is hope that Worm breaks mainstream.
Yes. I think we all want that to happen. I think so. And we're all sort of terrified of that happening also.
I am very terrified of that happening. Yeah.
But yeah. Okay.
All right. Sarah Penguin asks, if you could have one extremely minor one-off character from Worm team up with one minor one-off character from Ward, who would it be and why? Matt, you got anything here?
Minor / one-off. I mean, I want to say like Circus and what's her name?
I don't know. You're gonna have to be a little more specific.
I'm trying to pick somebody from Ward. Everyone seems so important in Ward because
is there such a thing as a one-off character in Ward?
Shortcut, Circus and Shortcut.
Really?
As like
Why?
But it's a buddy cop,
I see.
and they butt heads, and that's the premise.
I gotcha.
Okay, there you go.
I gotcha. I'm gonna do Moose and Wonton
Okay,
because I like Wonton.
I like it.
I put our buddy Wonton on March Madness, and like everyone was like, "What the fuck is he doing here?" And I was like, "It's because I love him. He's Tornado Man."
Poor Tornado Man.
I know.
All right, next question. Anti-Chris asks, as a crowdfunded series discussing a crowdfunded work, do you ever feel pressure to not go against the fandom or worried that other crowdfunded creators do? Pressure to hold back a bit on this fan favorite character, pressure to not mention how that popular ship squicks you out. People can be petty little bitches about that stuff, and no one would like the idea of losing Patreon supporters. I feel like we kind of call it as we see it.
Yeah. My short answer is no. My long answer is I'd be lying if I said those thoughts don't cross my mind every once in a while.
I think the kind of thing that tends to cross our mind is just be like more thoughtful about like, is this going to be is this thing that I want to say going to be taken in the way that I intended, or are the odds very high that it's going to be taken not in the way I intended, and then I'll have to spend 3 hours defending what I actually meant?
Yes.
And if that's the case, should I work on honing my point so that I can say it more clearly, or maybe just not say it because maybe it's not worth saying if like it's definitely going to get misunderstood, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
That's the only place where maybe I would say like the fact that I know people are listening is affecting my content.
Yeah, and honestly, I try very hard, and I am not perfect, but I try very hard to kind of stay out of all conversations about chapters until after I've recorded the episode and formed my own opinion, just so there's no chance, like if I like so I'm not even aware of like the community really loves this person, and I'm about to shit all over them or something. So I kind of take away even the temptation there for me.
Yeah.
I think obviously, you know, we don't want to lose supporters. Like we don't want to lose patrons, obviously, but we also don't want to just be people that just tell people what they want to hear just so we can get people to give us money. Like I don't think that's what people want when they support us. I don't think that's what we want. I don't think that's what anyone wants out of this work. So I agree with you that generally when we're saying stuff, we're saying what we think, and maybe like it does cause me, like if I don't agree with or don't care about a particular ship, as you mentioned here, I just won't mention it. And that's like it's mostly just because I'm indifferent enough to where I don't want to like make people feel like I'm challenging them on their interpretations of stuff unnecessarily when I don't even really care. It's just like, oh, that's cool. I don't see that, but yeah, go for it. Like there's no reason to bring that up.
Yeah. You know, earlier in this very episode, I said that I used to spend a lot of time on the Parahuman subreddit. It was like my go-to internet hangout for a long period of time. Nowadays, I spend many hours a week reading, writing, and recording for the show. I'm kind of tapped out of Parahumans content, and I don't really spend that much time keeping up with kind of what the fandom feels about stuff. I'm not saying I never go visit the live, the latest chapter threads. I do, but certainly not every week, and so I'm just not. Like Scott said, I'm maybe not as cognizant as I could be of even what the fan feels about this, what the fans feel about this. I mean, I just kind of see myself as one of the fans. I'm just like, this is just my take. So
yeah,
you know,
yeah. I mean, I think there are moments where we're like, yeah, this is probably going to piss some people off what I'm about to say here, but there are also moments when like we record an episode, release it, and like, oh shit, we pissed a lot of people. I didn't think I was going to piss a lot of people off with that. I didn't. Oops.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one thing I've also stopped doing as much generally is like and I still slip up with this every once in a while, but just like if someone posts something where they disagree with me, very early in the show, I used to always kind of like jump in and defend my opinion. And now I just kind of listen to what they have to say. And I'm just like, okay. Yeah. I don't feel the need to engage you in a response and have a back and forth fight about this. Like I see what you mean. I like it. I maybe don't agree for some reason, but I don't feel the need to like ridiculously defend myself. I think that's most of the fights we got in Worm was not necessarily because of what we said on the show, but the lengths of which I went to defend myself after the show when I felt like someone wasn't understanding me correctly or was doing something else. And I just don't think that's necessary. I just try to listen more and fight less.
Yeah, unless they're talking about free will or personhood.
All right, next we have a question from Julie, who asks, as we seem to be drawing closer to the conclusion of Ward, what's something that, looking back, surprised you the most about the way the sequel has turned out? Matt, what surprised you the most?
Well, for some reason, I had this perception that Ward was going to start like 100 years after Worm, and it was going to like be the world has collapsed, and we're living in like a feudal age of like almost a fantasy setting, except with parahuman powers. Mm-hmm. I don't know where I got this from. It might have just been like speculation that lodged in my brain as being credible. And so the fact that it was modern day, and not only modern day, but that it was a character that we knew, and then that character was Victoria Dallin. All of these are probably the biggest surprises to me. I mean, beyond that, like every detail about it is obviously not something I expected.
Sure.
I think part of my bias was also because I just finished Twig, obviously, because Wildbow had just finished writing Twig, and I was kind of in this headspace of old timey stuff. So yeah, that's where my head was at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like without knowing the subject, the thing that I'm most surprised about is the complexity of it. And I don't mean, obviously Worm is a very complex story and with a lot of complicated characters and complex themes. But I also think like Worm is a very traditionally structured type story outside the serialized structure, just like the rise and fall of action. And like it's very kind of controlled and structured, and it's structuring. I think Ward is a much different kind of book. And having only read Worm before it and having not read Pact or Twig, I really hadn't seen Wildbow's evolution as an author. And I really think he's pushing envelopes and trying things in this story that I didn't see in Worm. And that's, I guess it's surprising. It's not surprising that he's advanced himself as a writer, but it's surprising to see it a little different. As far as like, once I understood the scope of the story, what was the most surprising thing about the way the sequel has turned out? I was convinced this was going to be a Victoria gets to a point of forgiveness with Amy story, like from the beginning. Like I remember we talking right at the beginning of the story about like what the eventual Amy meeting is going to look like and how it's going to go. And I was very like primed by Worm into, this is a story with another unreliable narrator, and look at all the ways in which they are so unreliable and they're being unfair, and that is not really what the story is. It is not as interested in exploring that particular aspect of Victoria, and that's just very surprising to me at the time, coming off of the book that Worm was. I think it's cool because like you can see, look, he's doing different things. Like he's exploring different ideas. It's not just the themes of the story that are different, but it's like how he's getting to those themes is different.
Yeah. I mean, the way that he is approaching the whole story in almost every way is different. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's a good book.
Yeah. Cool. Good question though. I rarely think back about what I had thought about this before it started. Killer Kino asks, Ward places greater emphasis on trauma, loss, grief, etc. Who do you think is the most tragic character in Ward?
This is a tough one for me because to me, the most tragic character is a one who has no hope, right? And I think as much as I think a lot of our main cast is incredibly tragic, I think Kenzie's story is one of the most tragic stories in the entire book. I think I still have hope for Kenzie going into the future. So it feels wrong for me to label her as most tragic if there's still the hope that one day she could be in a better place.
Right. It depends on if you're using kind of the classical definition of tragic or just like, does it make you sad?
Right, like the story version. Yeah, I mean, if we're going by just like the does it make you sad definition, Kenzie for sure. Her story breaks my heart. but like tragedy in the story sense, I don't know.
I would like at a breakthrough. I was gonna say Chris without hesitation, because
that's a good answer.
Because he's got the classic tragic flaw in that it's in his makeup to be the way he is, and part of him fights against it, but the part of him that fights against his destructive nature is not stronger than the part that causes it. And it leads to his self-destruction. And where he is right now is a place of self-destruction. He could still be redeemed, of course, but right now in the story, I think that he fits the bill.
I've just mentally like removed him from Breakthrough in my head, that when I was running through the characters, I didn't even think of Chris.
Yeah, I mean,
which is crazy.
Like, it's interesting to think like if Tristan had like if you consider Tristan's arc just in the Tristan Byron interludes as being an isolated thing, and you don't know that he redeems himself later, that would be a very tragic arc, right? It's like it's a tragic hero. It's the hero who damns himself through his own choices type thing, right?
Yeah. It's a good answer. I like that. Also, I guess we have to say literally every single heartbroken, because Jesus.
Yeah.
But even then, like even seeing Candy say like that speech she gave to Daphne. That's not the right name. To Darlene.
Yeah.
Why did I say Daphne? Where did that come from?
It came from our other project.
Came from Frasier. Oh yeah, it did come from our other project. The speech she gives Darlene about how like we beat him, we won. That, I mean, as tragic as their story is, like that is hopeful and inspiring, and I loved that. So it feels weird to say yes, Candy, Darlene, most tragic. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right.
No Goodbye says Wildbow seems to like putting in indescribable things in a story and somehow manages to describe them to readers. Are there instances of these types of moments that you find to be your favorites? Or can you name an example of another author's work that managed to do the same or similar thing in an effective way? The first thing that I think of when it comes to this, Matt, is the Scion interlude. Like when we first see the shards like interacting with each other and how they're described. I thought was incredible.
That's exactly what I was thinking of. That's funny. Yeah, like their existence on their shard planet and all this stuff. Where I think that's totally where my head went to.
Yeah, and I think he's doing a pretty good job of it in this current arc of the story as well.
Yeah, I think so.
It's kind of flexing the same muscles. I mean, I think the key to this is kind of giving your reader something to attach onto. As crazy and out there you get, you need something to root yourself into that you understand. And you can't always do that with like words and phrases that people speak. So you have to get creative with it. And I think Wildbow generally does a good job at that.
I think that generally when something is hard to describe visually, he doesn't try to describe it by painting a picture in your head with descriptive visual words. He describes it on other levels where you understand what it is. And then that allows you to generate your own mental image, which maybe is completely radically different from everyone else's mental image, but as long as you understand how it works the same way everyone else does, you won't get in trouble that way.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that.
Cool. Hero of Old Iron says, you guys just had an episode on the Doofcast about the movie that shall not be named, where you pointed out a ton of stuff that didn't work, but there's rarely enough time or even much to say about what doesn't work in Ward. So here we go. What's the worst... God, what's the worst thing about Ward, and what don't you like?
I was going back and forth on whether I wanted to include this or not, because our whole let's not be negative thing. I think I can give an answer to this question that is not overly negative.
Okay.
I think Ward is a rough draft because it is. Yeah. Like I think the biggest issues the book has is that like sometimes the pacing is a little wonky. Sometimes the structure is a little wonky. Things are introduced and dropped for probably too long. I think the concept of Chris's secret, the time between when Chris disappeared from the story and when that secret was revealed to us, was a little wonky to me. But these are not like fundamental flaws in the story itself. They're just like things that on a second pass, someone would tighten up a little bit. Like, this is very much a story that's being written, that we're reading as it is being written. And therefore, there are bumps in that road, and those bumps will need to be smoothed out a little bit as the story goes through the motions. I think the fact that it is as good as it is, considering this, continues to be remarkable to me. But I'd be lying if I said those aren't there at times, that there's times when I'm like, we don't talk about those things generally because I don't want to. I don't want to be that kind of show. But yeah, I mean, I think that is a problem that this story has at times, for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's weird, kind of a strange. This is gonna come out like a compliment, I guess. But like, so many of the chapters just like blow me away. That when there's a chapter where I'm just like, yeah, that's pretty good. It feels like a letdown relative to the other ones, but that's completely unfair because it's still well written. It still hits all the, it still is serving a function in the story. Like the earlier chapters in arcs tend to be table setting. Like that's a term we use a lot. Completely necessary, right? You cannot have every single chapter be, the one where Cradle gets crushed by a shelf or something. Like the story does not work that way. But definitely there's some chapters where I'm like way more into things than others. And I don't know whether to say that's a criticism or what. Like that's just a fact about the story. Like I don't know. I'm not saying I disagree with you about the pacing because I haven't really formulated an opinion about it. But I will say that I suspect that when we go back and this is done and we binge through it and we just reread it straight through, the story will feel completely different. And I'm not necessarily saying then all the pacing problems will go away, but I do think that stuff like, oh, it's been a long time since we touched on this, that goes away when you're reading it not one chapter every 4 days,
Sure.
But that's I didn't mean to contradict you. I'm just saying, like,
I think you're absolutely right. I don't know.
Yeah.
I agree with you that I don't know if that on its own is going to solve some of the critique I have, but I do agree that it is a different experience reading a book this way.
Yeah.
And I wonder, I mean, one of the things I secretly wanted to answer for myself, and one of the reasons I wanted to do, hey, let's cover Ward as it's being written, is answer the question of, do I like reading stories this way? Is this my ideal way of consuming a story? And I don't know if I've gotten to that answer yet. I think I want to wait until the story's done until I really conclude on that answer.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I actually have my suspicion that I like reading things straight through. But I definitely enjoy having something to look forward to every few days. I like keeping up with a web serial. So both things. All right.
Farm Fresh Hornets asks, was there any topic or moment either of you put a pin in that you really did want to get into but never got a good opportunity to revisit? If so, what was it? See, the problem with this is the reason we don't ever pull that pin out is because we forget it was there. So it's hard to answer this question because we've forgotten those pins.
I feel like we talk about everything eventually. Like, maybe sometimes it'll be like 3 weeks later and I'll be like, oh yeah, you know what? This reminds me of that thing that Tattletale did 8 chapters ago.
Yeah.
And then I get a chance to talk about it, right? Because like all of you, we all read the story the same, right? And as you're reading, something might stick out to you and you'll think, oh, that's interesting. I wonder where we're going to go with that. And then you keep reading and that completely passes out of your brain, possibly until it pays off. And then you think, oh yeah, that was in there. I remember that now.
Right.
Like that's the way our memories are kind of keyed up. And sometimes I'm lucky enough that like, as I'm taking my notes, I will pull out the thing that caught my attention and then we'll talk about it. Sometimes I won't though. Sometimes my first read through, I just read it. I just read it like everybody else.
Sure,
I don't take notes. And so sometimes I do kind of like have a feeling about something and then I don't ever talk about it. But that's usually just because my brain didn't like archive it properly. And then it comes up later in the proper context and that's fine too. And then I can talk about it then. So
yeah. You want to know something I privately put a pin in that I didn't say that on the show, but I wish we had talked about it?
What?
Was talking about Rain in the last couple chapters.
Uh-huh.
And I'm kind of upset that we didn't really focus on him at all because I thought he was a real badass. And we didn't talk at all about the moment where he like screams Cradle's name. I wish we had talked about that because I think was amazing. Like he's on the ground, like been crushed by a rock and still is just like screaming at Cradle and he distracts him just long enough for them to get him. So
I think, somebody in the, man, I need to get better at this. Somebody either in the Discord or the subreddit pointed out that the members of the mall cluster plus Colt, of course, were really all instrumental in bringing down Cradle. It was Sveta who kind of pushed the shelf on him, but they all had a hand in it directly, including Rain. So
Yep, totally agree.
Cool. Rid Tom says Wildbow loves his parallels, as you mentioned with Rex and Vic, and I think the shards are the ultimate expression of this. Waste is an extreme version or even caricature of Victoria. Puts people on a pedestal, Victoria, while putting itself down, calling itself worthless, wanting to communicate with others to prevent death, wishing to improve itself constantly, and the desire for a permanent title. Cradle's and March's shards all share their traits and mannerisms as well. My question is, how much stock would you place in these shards going after like-minded hosts versus the shards gaining influence from the hosts themselves? And what about the weird cases like K70s?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like a chicken or egg situation, right? Like it's how much of the shard... Huh? Yeah, sorry. How much of the shard... the shard's personality is pulled from its host versus the reason they were connecting to the host in the first place was because they saw a kindred spirit there.
It seems like Grasping Self was kind of a creep before it found Cradle. I think maybe the answer is something like some of them are just stronger personalities than others. Like we've always heard, like we hear about Grasping Self trying to push him around, push Cradle around. We hear about Amy's shard like hating her, and that's the reason why she has such a there's lots of reasons why she makes so many mistakes, but Victoria's shard is this like composite of several shards, which is already a unique thing, and so it's probably intrinsically weak and thus impressionable.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely there's definitely textual support that the host is having an effect on the shard, right? Like that definitely is in the story as something that is occurring. But yeah, I mean, to their question, it's how much is one versus the other.
I don't know. Yeah. I like my answer that the weaker the shard, the more influence the human will have.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Cool.
All right, where were we?
Nugget Blaster.
Good old Nugget Blaster. From a civilian perspective, parahumans have been extremely devastating to the entire way of human life. Endbringer attacks, the Slaughterhouse 9, Gold Morning, and now the abandonment of the city in anticipation of another parahuman-caused catastrophe. So, with the continuing devastation caused by the powers and shards influencing parahumans towards conflict, is there a way for regular humans to ever coexist peacefully, have an equal footing with parahumans? Or would humans be better off starting their own society where they're not at the mercy of good or bad capes? Matt?
Coexist peacefully, yes. Have an equal footing, no. Because by definition, if they have magic powers, you can't really be equal with them unless they find some way of like doing a shard shenanigans to the extent where they can share powers around freely.
Yeah.
I always think about it's a weird pull, but the Wheel of Time actually, because I guess this is I don't know how much Wheel of Time I want to spoil.
I'm shocked you're pulling from Wheel of Time.
Yeah, well, I don't usually, do I?
You've never done this before.
I mean, I can't tell how sarcastic you're being. I don't talk about it that often, do I?
You don't talk about it that often. But you definitely have talked about it.
Okay, that's true. But like there's at one point in the story, there's this like vision of the past. And in the past, it was shown that like the people with magic and the people without magic just like lived in perfect harmony. And it provides this interesting vision of like, there's no other than like the conflict drive and the propensity of the shards and what they are, there's no reason why they can't live in harmony.
Yeah.
Like if violent people get the help they need, and if triggers stop only happening to violent people, and if they stop getting a conflict drive after they get a power, then it could be good. But if those things don't get fixed, I have a hard time seeing how it could be fixed.
I mean, one of the things that jumps out to me just in the way Nugget Blaster phrased this question is like, these things that have been extremely devastating to the entire way of human life. Endbringer Tech, Slaughterhouse 9, Gold Morning, Abandonment of the City. These things are also equally devastating to all the parahumans as well as the humans, right?
Right.
So I think the hope of peace amongst these two groups of people is the shared understanding that this terrible shit is happening to both of them, that to stop lumping all the bad people and all the good people into just those Cape people. And that's tough because there's so many damn violent, terrible Cape people.
Right.
It's hard.
The fun thing about the direction I feel like Ward is going is that you might be tempted to say, yeah, we shouldn't blame the Capes. We should blame the invading aliens who are attached to their heads. But I think the direction Ward might be going is to say, well, they're in just as much trouble as the people. Let's not blame anyone. Let's just try to work together.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Work together with the shards. That's the solution.
That's the solution. Bisexual Punch Party says, if the Endbringers were Pokemon starters, which would you choose?
Well, Matt, the wrong answer is Behemoth because he's the fire one. And the first gym in Pokemon is a rock gym. And therefore, bringing a fire Pokemon to a rock gym is stupid. So definitely not that one.
Okay.
And that's all I remember from Pokemon Red and Blue, the only Pokemon game I've ever played.
Well, it seems...
So I'm going to say the Squirtle one and pick Leviathan.
Yeah, that seems logical. Although I'm always the one who picks like the creature that's going to be the most powerful later down the road, even if it's not at first, which is obviously the Seamerg. So, Seamerg.
Fine. If you want to just ruin the whole game by picking the easy path. Sure, Matt. Sure.
It's the easy path.
Yeah.
Fine.
All right. Koala's DLP says, with the relative success and integration of Deep Impact, what podcast channel would you love to see cover Twig chapter by chapter, be subsumed into the Doof Podcast Hub? I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't even be able to think of it. Like we didn't know the Deep Impact guys before they started doing Deep Impact, really. So
I don't. Yeah, I don't have anything in mind. I'm like, oh, the McElroys.
Yeah,
the McElroys do a Twig podcast. No, I don't think so.
You know, I found out today that Griffin McElroy loves the OC, and I'm like, what can I do here?
Let's make this happen.
Can I be creepy? I am going to Austin this week. Griffin, he'll just stand in the middle of Austin and yell, Griffin.
Yeah, Griffin, got something for you.
The OC. Do you like it? Seth Cohen.
You tell us how that works out for you.
I will.
Okay. Seargrog says, what are your 3 or less most favorite scenes in Ward so far, and why do you think they'll work so well for you?
Oh boy. Kenzie's dinner.
Okay.
God, there's so many things, Matt, that I'm being overwhelmed by options. Ashley's death.
Scenes. Yeah.
Ashley's death.
I find it a lot easier to pick a chapter than a scene.
Mm-hmm.
I like the prison brawl a lot where her hand gets flayed. Man, yeah, this is hard. This is great audio too, by the way.
You know, I went back and read the first chapter recently. I really liked it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's shocker, but I really like what Wildbow is doing in that chapter. And he's playing a little game with not knowing who the protagonist is, but it's just doing so many things. It's setting up so many of the things that the book has really focused on. And I don't know. I like that. I think I've actually given that answer before, right? Damn it. But I really like the first chapter. I think Ashley's death remains the most powerful moment in the story for me.
Yeah.
For sure. Unquestionably.
I like the goddess ensnaring all of them as a moment.
Oh, that was good. When you realize that she has all of them. Yeah. That's good. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. All right. They also ask, if you were an ordinary citizen in the city with the expected level of knowledge they have, what do you think your opinion of parahumans and specifically parahuman heroes would be?
I think I'd probably fucking hate them.
Yeah, I'd probably be terrified. like if I'm me and I have my children in the city and I'm trying to like keep them safe and that's my priority in the world, then yeah, I would be. I don't think I'd be super like keen on, because like you say the expected level of knowledge they have. Like I think their level of knowledge is pretty low. Like they're probably like they're mainlining talk radio basically, and they get like Victoria goes on and gives one info dump on Scion, and then like the news cycle chews it up and turns it into whatever the fuck. So I'm just imagining like I would be horribly misinformed and also terrified, and that would not make that would not lead toward a sympathetic decision making framework.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the first thing that jumped in my head was like, oh, well, I'll probably still love Chevalier. And then I was like, well, wait a minute, how much would this version of me know about Chevalier? Like how much of his amazingness would I see, or would I just see it filtered through the entire experiences of living in this world and actually be like, no, never mind.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Because I think there would be a version of me when Capes, like this Cape stuff first started happening and the PRT first was being stood up and all this stuff was happening, that would have been like really into it and probably would have really been into the Triumvirate as this like beacon of awesomeness in this world. And I think that version of me, once the betrayal of the Triumvirate was revealed, would take it very hard and would color my feeling on Capes as a whole. And I think everything that's happened since then would only have made that opinion worse.
Yeah, I like that. That's some good thinking there, Scott.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun to think about because you have to go back and consider, like, if Capes had been around since I was a kid, I really have no idea what I would think about them. Like, the reason I think superheroes are fun is because they're not real. Yeah, and I don't have to think about these things, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like we have weird, complicated feelings about, you know, the morality of war and so forth. We don't have to have those feelings about superheroes unless we want to read a fun story that delves into that.
True.
So yeah, I don't know is my answer.
It's a good one. All right. Couture2 says, how has reading Worm/Ward and other Wildbow works influenced your experience of other stories? Do you notice characterization differently? Does the narrative efficiency of shorter books strike you differently than before? I mean, yes, I read differently, like 100,000,000%. Like I don't think you can read a book like Worm at the level at which we read it and not have your methods of reading change. It just happens automatically now. Like you pick up on stuff, you see patterns and you see characterization and you see what the author's doing. The more you read critically, the more you're going to be able to do that generally. And so it definitely has had an effect on me.
There's also the fact that most of the books I read outside of Parahumans are for the book club, which I'm also planning to talk about. And so as I'm reading / listening to the audiobook, I am reading it with my ear towards like, yeah, see what he's doing there. Okay, yeah, this is you know, this is this is going to come back later, and like maybe even going so far as to like somewhat map out what I want to say about a certain aspect of the story, literally while I'm listening to it.
Sure.
Yeah. So the book club probably changes the way I read more than the Parahumans podcast have, actually.
Because it's like just traditional sized books, and it's traditional, like it's about the time you would spend reading a book anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see that.
Yeah. Matrim Stormblessed, great name, says, now that we've seen Mr. Hugs and the other forms of the Maul Cluster, what forms do you think breakthrough shards would take in this sort of dream space?
I imagine Waste as like this lumpy piece of shit that can't do anything.
Yeah, it looks like two different things crammed together.
Yeah, and it probably just makes this noise like...
It's fun to imagine Capricorn's shard because I'm still literally not sure if that's 2 shards or 1 shard.
Yeah,
like is it
know.
Is it just a generic matter generation shard that takes on different aspects for the 2 different brothers, or is it 2? Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, them having their own distinct dream rooms seems to indicate to me that they're unique shards. So
perhaps.
But it's all fucking metaphysical craziness, so I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Like you can, Kenzie's is gonna have a whole bunch of like mechanical eyes on stalks and drones and shit like that.
I want to say that I'm not creative enough to come up with an answer for this question,
right,
which makes me feel bad about myself.
I mean, the thing is, like, my off the cuff answer of like, oh, Kenzie's gonna have a bunch of eyes. That's like I put 0 seconds of thought into it, and it was a camera tinker, and so of course it has
it's like
eyes,
the most obvious.
But like
thing,
Wildbow would totally make it some twist, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like, oh, it's not quite what I thought, you know. I don't know. I don't have the creativity to literally come up with like many clever interpretations, but it's a good question.
You are a more creative person than I am, because let me give a great instance of this. So for last week's episode, I wrote the intro for that one, and I wrote our intro idea was what kind of shard space would we have, and mine was I'd be like in a library where people use food as bookmarks, because I've been seeing that meme on the internet. And then Matt wrote this like really trippy, like disturbing thing.
But I was mostly just ripping off the intro to Neuromancer.
What?
Yeah.
I'm so disappointed.
Yeah, that wasn't creativity.
I was really impressed with you. I take it all back. I take it away.
No. Sorry. I'm
I was just trying to compliment you.
Yeah, well,
you're just stealing. You're just stealing.
I thought everyone would get the reference because Neuromancer is a classic that everyone should read.
I haven't read that book, so how would I get it?
It's a famous first line of the book.
Is it?
Yeah.
How famous?
I don't know. We'll have to ask everyone.
Like best of times, worst of times, famous, Matt. I don't think so.
The sky was the color of television tuned to a dead channel is a classic opening line of a book. The sky above the harbor was the color of television turned to a dead channel. It's completely memorable, beautiful first line. Anyway,
I think the man in black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed him is much more memorable, sir.
Fine. I'm not going to argue with you right now.
I have nothing to stand on in this argument because I have no idea. PETA Enigma asks, you've avoided talking about it, so I'm going to ask about it. Thanks, PETA. Ward has multiple times directly drawn a contrast between Victoria and Taylor. Taylor is called the queen of escalation by the fandom, but before we knew Victoria was the protagonist, we knew she de-escalated situations. Tattletale, on the other hand, points to a similarity between the two, and that they're both morons with a death wish. Do you think Ward is saying something when it references the differences and similarities between them? What do you think it's saying? Finally, Taylor lost herself to her passenger in the end of Worm. Do you think Victoria would make a similar sacrifice? Okay, so let's take these questions one at a time.
Okay.
Do you think Ward is saying something when it references the differences and similarities between Taylor and Victoria?
No.
What?
No, I'm just kidding. Yes. I mean, I think we did talk about that last episode a bit. The idea that, or I mean, I guess we were talking about it in context of Tattletale, really.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, these protagonists, they're not quite. It's not like Wildbow sat down with a piece of paper and was like, "All right, let me design a character who is the opposite of Taylor." Victoria is not the opposite of Taylor. In fact, they have some similarities. Mm-hmm. They both want to help people, right? You could say that the reason Taylor became a villain was because she wanted to help people, and I think you would be right, with the exception that she is really good at deluding herself, and I don't know how much she ever really expected that, but whatever, that's a separate conversation. Victoria is the opposite, though, in that while Taylor is the master at deluding herself, Victoria almost can't delude herself to save her life. Like she's too hyper conscious of everything that's going on in her mind and her body and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, Taylor was blind and didn't notice. Victoria gives us, all this detail about everything that's happening with her all the time. So there's just a bunch of stuff, right? Like, and the story is absolutely saying like, well, these are different people with different ways of dealing with stuff. And that's going to have ramifications in how they deal with the struggles that they're facing in the story. And, I don't know if Wildbow is lecturing, I don't think he's saying you should be more like Victoria in this way and you should be more like Taylor in this way. But I think he is definitely showing that like some ways of being in the world are going to reliably fuck you up, and maybe some are not. I think that certain aspects of Victoria are meant to be positive. Some are not, obviously.
Yeah. Well, the thing I like about both these characters generally is that some of their most positive aspects are the things that also get them in the most trouble.
Yeah.
And I think that's something they both share. But I do think it's just this general belief between them of trying to, like, of course it makes sense. You want to build an active protagonist. So you want to build a protagonist that's actively working towards resolving of their central conflict. So generally they are both people that stand up and do and act because you want them to be that way. But I mean, obviously, like, their differences, and I mean, like, a lot of this is going to depend on where the book ends up, right? Like, the differences between Taylor and Victoria, I think, are going to display the differences between the endings of these two books. And I think that kind of moves to Peta's second half of this question, where, you know, Taylor lost herself in the passenger at the end of Worm. Do you think Victoria would make a similar sacrifice? I do. I do think Victoria would do that. I don't know if that's where the book is going to go. I don't know if the book is going to lay it out in that kind of very similar way. I don't think it will. But given that option, I feel like Victoria would do that. And that would, I think, be growth for Victoria, because, like, she would kind of be perhaps returning to this out of control, like, wretch, like, hospital time person that she was so terrified of.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I could answer it either way. Like, I think your answer works in the affirmative, but you could also say, no, she wouldn't, because as a person, what she values is her autonomy and her self-control, and the idea of sacrificing that's like the thing that she's worked for so many years to protect and cherish, and she's seen how bad things can get if she gives up on that, right? So you could say that it would be growth for her to realize, like, oh, you don't need to do that. But, like, I don't know if that's necessarily growth. That could just be literally self-destruction, the way Tattletale frames it. Like, it's I don't know, because, like, Worm is not a tragedy until it's over, right?
Sure.
It's an adventure story until the last couple arcs, and then you're like, oh, okay, it was a tragedy, actually. So, like you just said, we can't really answer this question fully until we know where Victoria is going to end up.
Yeah, but, like, I mean, let's Wrath of the Lich King it for a second. Like, they kill the Lich King, and Victoria is told, there always must be one. You must sit in that chair. You don't think she does that?
If it's a choice between that and, like, the whole city being destroyed, I guess she would. But I feel like maybe her team wouldn't let her. Like, that's one thing that this story is you know, made a big point of is the relationships, the connections between people, just the theme of connections in general. The idea that someone would try to destroy themselves and that others would stop them, even if them doing it is, like, the utilitarian choice or the moral choice. That's something that I can see happening in this story.
Yeah, I mean, I like that kind of framing, because, I mean, one of the biggest differences between Victoria and Taylor, I think, are the people that each of them surround themselves with. And Taylor, as much as she cared about her group of people and there's great, wonderful connections between them, Taylor always acted unilaterally, right? Like, she was always going to do the thing that she wanted to do. I don't think Victoria does that. I think Victoria's team, her group, is much more important to her. And I think it's interesting to see how, if presented with the same choice in the same manner via these two different books, the idea that her team would be there to talk her out of it is really thematically fascinating to me. Yeah. So I like that a lot.
I feel like one of the most thematically important bits of Ward, like, in retrospect, we're going to say this was a critically important piece of Ward, was when Contessa gives them the A, B, or C options and they refuse to choose. Like, Taylor would have just fucking chose.
Yeah, sure.
Like she would have just done it. No big deal. What's the problem, everybody?
Yeah.
And the fact that not only did Vicky not choose, but nobody on her team could really be the one to choose. That's like the most anti-Taylor moment of the story in a way that feels pretty intentional to me.
Yeah, I like that.
And I see, like, I feel like that is heading somewhere. Like, I feel like we haven't seen the story, you know, draw the final line of what it's saying with that idea that Contessa gave them this choice and they threw it back at her. I think Contessa's going to come back in the story. We're going to understand more what her deal is and what that was all about.
Yeah, I like that. Okay. Sure.
Cool. Son of Stannis says, which character from War do you relate to the most?
I think I relate to bits and pieces of each of them. It's interestingly enough. Like, I think there's parts of Sveta I relate to. There's parts of Kenzie I relate to. I relate to a lot of Victoria. I relate to Tristan a little bit, and a little bit of Byron as well. I relate to the I'm really social and my siblings were not parts of Tristan, and I relate to the shining star that was my older sister part of Byron. So I don't know if there's one that I really relate to like more than the other.
Yeah, I don't know if I can do better than that answer. Yeah, I've like pretty much whatever character whose interlude we're in, I relate to them perfectly. Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, next question.
Next question. Which characters do you want to see an interlude from that hasn't had one in Ward yet?
Which character hasn't had an interlude? I mean, Amy, like, for sure.
Yes.
There's got to be an Amy interlude.
Yes. We got a little bit from Teacher. We got a little bit from Chris already.
Carol, for sure.
Carol, yeah. Like an update on how Carol's doing and how Carol is feeling about things. Mark is someone we've never had an interlude from. So I would say,
that's true.
I think Amy is the number one choice, and then I would say Mark for number two choice.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. And then the final question from Son of Stannis: which member of Breakthrough has your favorite character arc thus far?
Rain forever.
And since you already picked Rain, I just love Tristan's for some reason. I don't know why. Just the idea of just doing an unequivocally horrible thing, and then just like trying to come to grips with having done that is a fantastically. Yeah. I guess it's similar to Damsel's arc, to Ashley's arc, but it's a whole different cast to it, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good answer. I love all of them so much. Yeah. I think I really can't wait to see the place that Tristan and Byron end up in.
Yeah.
I'm really fascinated to see that.
Yeah.
All right. Stronger Bird asks, of all the powers seen in Parahumans, with the restrictions that you're not allowed to use it to help others. Oh. And excluding Eidolon's and Contessa's powers, which would you choose? So I can't help people? So what's the most selfish power that exists out there?
Man, I don't know. See, this is like asking like what power you would want. I think previously I've answered that I would want a mover power because I just want to be able to fly. Like I think
God, that would be cool.
I think Alexandria is a good answer because like first of all, there's nothing in this world that could harm you. Like you'd be tempted to think of like
Incorrect.
a master or a thinker power, but like
bugs.
I feel like, well, that's true. Okay, fine. But I'm not going to let anyone find that out. But like a master or a thinker power would give you like a lot of power in this world, but also I wouldn't like the moral hazard that would expose me to. Whereas if I had the Alexandria power set, then I would just be a superhero. It would be very simple.
So, yeah, I like that. Alexandria, that's a good answer. Okay. I'm stealing it.
Cool.
Boom. All right, as a follow-up question, I just lost it. Where'd it go?
Which
non-Case 53 power would you find the most distressing to gain?
Nursery.
Nursery, Needle Chick, Barf Bat, and Chug-a-Lug, that whole deal.
Uh-huh.
The one guy in Worm that like impregnates himself with his teammates. There's a whole lot of options here.
Yeah. I mean, even just like Bonesaw's power would be distressing because it's like, okay, all I can do is do horrific mockeries of surgeries on people. I can't just do a normal surgery. My power always makes me put secret weapons in their body.
Here's a left field answer: Tattletale. I think that power would be really distressing.
Yeah, right.
I don't want to know what people think of me.
yeah. It seems to make her miserable. That's a great answer. That's great. Yeah. Like because that's the most overt example of a shard talking to a person, basically. Yeah. So like all it's doing is it's this intrusive voice just shitting on her day constantly.
Yeah. She fucking hates you. She hates you. She thinks you're a piece of shit.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks.
Butcher's a bad power.
Oh yeah. Jesus.
All right. Next question.
I think the ratio of terrible fucking powers to yay powers is
pretty high.
Tipped heavily in one way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kieran asks, What character would you most like to see an interlude from? Wait, did you say that?
It's a same question, different.
Same question. Okay, yeah. We already answered that one.
Yeah.
If you could pick one character to grant a repeat interlude, who would you choose? That's.
I don't know.
Yeah. I feel like Carol, because we did actually have a Carol interlude. So
yeah, I guess does that count? Like, does the rules of the story
that's a good point.
Count as a repeat interlude across books? I don't know.
I'm gonna say it anyway.
Okay, sure. I am going to say Rain. He's had like 6, but why not?
Yeah,
more?
We'll see how he's doing now.
Yeah.
Favorite breakthrough member and favorite breakthrough interlude. And don't make me choose.
I'm going to say don't make me choose, but if you're going to make me choose, Rain and Kenzie's interlude.
I mean, Eclipse was fantastic.
That's a good answer. Yeah. Fuck.
I mean, they're all good answers, aren't they?
Yeah.
Who would you have had be Ward's protagonist, if not Victoria?
Taylor. I have no idea. I mean, whoever the protagonist is shapes what the entire story is, so it would be a completely different book.
Right.
But
that's a good point.
Lisa would have been interesting at protagonist.
Yeah. Alex somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My boy.
Yeah. Or I mean, interestingly, Gru could actually be the protagonist.
That would be interesting.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be weird?
Yeah.
And then finally, are there plans to continue the Ballad of Fugly Bob?
I'm just going to say no,
Yeah.
and then if it ever happens, it'll be a fun surprise.
Yeah, that's a good answer.
All right. Roger Dodged Lodgers. It's difficult to read. Says, I recently started following along, so I don't know if this has come up before, but in light of everything that's happened up to this point from the start, how would you interpret Mrs. Sims' confession from Shadow 5.8 in regards to Victoria and the rest of Team's breakthroughs, journey, and choices? And then this question asker linked the thing in particular, the lines in particular, which is good because I had totally forgotten who Mrs. Sims was, and I was like, who? So you want to read this, Matt?
Yeah. So it's the old fallen woman standing on her porch, basically. Or I don't know if she's old, whatever. There's right and there's wrong. She said, you can do everything right moment by moment and still end up on the wrong side, too beaten down to fight things anymore. Why this? Why now? I had the feeling it was more of a confession than advice. She wasn't fallen, not at heart. She just ended up here. How the hell did that happen? Maybe that in itself was the confession. I've been beaten down before, I said. I'll find a way to keep fighting. Humans are resilient. We made it through Gold Morning. It's very easy to lose sight of how beaten down you are, she said. Don't let the little things slide. We have to be vigilant. Yeah, that seems important.
I see what Roger is doing here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is, I think that quote, especially in context of what we've seen Victoria put herself through in the story, it is very easy to lose sight of how beaten down you are, is absolutely true to her. That is constantly what she does. And I think we're seeing maybe a little bit of loss of vigilance from her on, this whole shard door thing. Like, I keep thinking about waste and this creeping control of waste that's happening, and I don't know what it's going to mean or where it's going to go, but that vigilance has seemed to be a little bit down, and it's because they're doing things that they need to do, right? This concept early in the quote, you can do everything right moment by moment. I think when we read this, we linked it back to Taylor, but very, very true to Victoria and what she's putting herself through right now.
Yeah, this could be one of those sentences that on a reread, after we have the totality of the book in mind, feels like a hidden thesis statement.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool.
And I'm glad Roger Dodged Lodgers reminded me of it, because I had totally forgotten that this existed. That was like a year and a half ago.
I too was like, Mrs. Sims. Yes, of course. Yes. Mrs. Sims.
Yes.
Frantically Googling. All right.
Next question.
From Death of the Artist. Mailbag question. If the We've Got Ward cast were a cluster trigger, what would your gimmick be?
It had to be something to do with like remote conversations, right? Because something podcasty. Yeah,
we have to have. We would apportion powers through conversation, and it could be a remote conversation.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's something about our power where we can never be in the same room. Actually.
Yeah. But we have to talk through like a shitty program that updates all the time and barely ever works.
Yeah. Crashes.
Skype
loses an entire episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that.
I'm gonna go with
that's
that.
a good answer.
Yeah, there we
That's
go. It has to be mediated by digital technology. There you go. Yeah.
There you go. All right. SNES C asks, a big reason why I listen to the podcast is get another opinion on the story outside of my own. There have been multiple times where you provided an interpretation of the story that I hadn't considered and even changed my mind about how the events of the story should be read. However, there are some points where I've still disagreed with your version of events, which leads me to my questions. Over the course of the podcast, which of your opinions have received the most disagreement from your listeners? Which dissenting opinions surprised you the most? Have you ever changed your mind about something you said after hearing another opinion after the fact? I mean, I think that like the view I had on Taylor is probably like the biggest dissenting opinion, right?
Probably for you, yeah.
Yeah.
I think mine would be just something about free will because that's what I'm always arguing with people about.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, I think I think and I think that surprised me at the beginning only because to me it felt like so. I don't want to say transparent because that sounds rude, but it felt just so clear. That's the same. It means the same thing. It felt so clear to me that this is what the story was saying with Taylor. Like I really was honestly shocked when I heard people say, no, actually, like this is what I think. And that was sort of surprising to me, and not in a way in which I'm going to say, no, you're wrong. I think one of the greatest things that the show has done for me is kind of settle down when someone disagrees with my interpretation of something and just be like, okay, well, that's cool. We have our own things and that's great. And I don't need to convince you that mine is the right way. Here's my podcast in which I outline the reasons why I think this, but I don't need to convince you of that. Like SNES here, you say that you still disagree with us on our takes of some things. And I think that's fine and great. But I think definitely Taylor. I mean, in this book in particular, I think the thing that's riled people up the most from me is the Byron Tristan stuff. And I do think that when I went back and listened to those episodes after I saw how upset people got at me, I do understand where they're coming from. And I do think in the desire to like intentionally try to pull out something that I thought the book was saying subtextually, I focused too much on it to the point where it made it seem like I was saying that this person did nothing wrong and this person actually did all the bad stuff, which is not what I was trying to do. I just totally saw where that came from.
Yeah, I suppose so. I think that's just how it had to be, though. Like, I think my answer then and now was like, okay, then you try doing an episode about this. And I mean,
say that.
I don't even mean this in like a shitty way. I'm just saying like you will then see that it is impossible to do what you're trying to suggest we should have done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Like that's yeah. That's not even I don't even see that as a disagreement. That's more like a tone thing. Sure. And I'm like, look, like nobody can really control the tone they're conveying because tone is all in the ear of the beholder. So
yeah, I mean, not entirely, but I know what you mean.
In this case, I think a lot of it was, yeah. What was I gonna say on this question?
I don't know, Matt.
I don't know. I think it's interesting to me because sometimes I get in a mood where the idea of somebody disagreeing with me is just confusing because I'm like, it's like if you're standing next to me and we're looking at a painting in an art gallery and I say like, I think that the background is a lighter color to provide a sense of distance between the background and the foreground. And then you say, I think the background is lighter color to provide like contrast and relief to make the foreground images stand out more. And then there are a few things that can happen, right? I can say, no, I think my take is right. Or I can say, yeah, probably both of those things, actually. Like the artist probably knows what they're doing. They probably implemented this technique to do multiple things at the same time. And thanks for pointing that out. That's a good take. Or I might even say, you know what, I bet you're right. And mine, I'm kind of waffling on mine now that I think about it. But like, it just strikes me as like disagreeing and being like, know the thing I said is right is the least useful and least fun possible way of engaging with art or life in general. And so I'm just like, if you disagree with my opinion on stuff in the show, I'm just like, okay, I'm happy to hear your opinion. Like, I don't know if you have to disagree with me, because I hold all of my opinions so lightly in the first place that if you tell me your opinion, I'm pretty likely to just be like, yeah, that's a good point. Like,
sure.
We don't have to argue about it. There are sub things like, is free will an illusion? That's not really about Ward. That's a philosophy thing. That's a completely separate thing. And I enjoy arguing about that because it's fun, but that's not art. That's not an art question. That's a separate question. I don't know. I felt like I had to unload all of that, because people often talk about the idea of like disagreeing with our opinions. And I'm like, well, I don't even feel like I'm saying my opinions. I'm giving my interpretations. Interpretations are not the same thing as opinions, I don't think.
I agree. I think one of the things is there's a natural kind of authority that, being a voice coming out of a machine creates. Like, we are the ones podcasting about the thing. So there's like this natural, like, unearned authority feeling to that. And I'm frequently uncomfortable with that, because like we said, we have no professional training in this. We are guys that read a lot of stories, really like diving into them and analyzing them. We admitted on this very show here that we had never done the kind of analysis we were doing on this book ever before we started doing it. So I always like put like expertly dissect and discuss was in my mind a little tongue in cheek. But it didn't come off that way. So I think like the pushback, I think, to some of our opinions is this idea that we are holding ourselves up to be the authority on the subject and then are saying something that people think is wrong. And so there's pushback to that, which I get that for sure.
Sure. But I get that too. And that's why I take opportunities like this to qualify and say, like, it's an interpretation, and I welcome your interpretations. And I've read many things in the Reddit thread where I'm like, oh, I love that. That is now my new interpretation too.
That's definitely happened with me too. The second part of your question, have you ever changed your mind about something you said after hearing another opinion on the fact? Oh God, so many times. We've never like done a segment on that, because it would just be a mess. Like, be like, actually, I talked about this last time and I want to correct that because I read this and now I agree with this. But I do think when that comes up naturally in interpretations, I think we have showed that out. But I think that happens all the time.
Sure.
The last thing I'll say is, like, I think there's a contingent of people out there that kind of wish that you and I argued more. And I think the reason we don't is what you're describing right here. There's this idea that, like, we don't always agree on everything, but when we do disagree, it's always just like, well, I don't quite, this is how I see it. And then you're like, yeah, okay. And then we just kind of move on. Like,
right.
I guess we could like push each other on that.
Yeah.
But I just don't see I don't think that makes good audio either. I don't think that would be interesting to listen to.
I think the closest we would get in that scenario is maybe I would say, I don't know about that. And then you would say, like, well, did you remember this aspect that supports my thesis? And then I would either say, oh yeah, that makes sense. Or I would just be like, I just think that adds up in a different way. And then, like there's no need to reach a consensus about this stuff. Like it's art, right? Like like that's the fun of talking about it is it's a dynamic process. You're figuring out what you think about it as you think about it.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what my opinions are.
And it is constantly evolving. Yeah. Constantly. I listened to some of our old episodes of Worm and noticed that my opinion on this particular thing has shifted and changed, and it's not diametrically opposed to the way I interpret it the first time, but it's definitely altered. Because that's just what happens.
Yeah. All right. Good question. I like that one.
Yeah, it was great.
Give us the opportunity to kind of hash out some things. Blairy345 says, Wildbow has played with the tropes of superhero comics and stories before. The evil clones in the Echidna arc is the first one I can think of. What common superhero trope that hasn't appeared in Worm/Ward would you like to see Wildbow's take on, and why?
So I have an answer to this, and it might kind of be cheating, because the thing that I don't think these books have ever really explored is really the concept of secret identities. Not in any kind of detail, because I think with Taylor, there was never any like real juggling of the two different lives because she just kind of dove headlong into one of them and left the other behind. And Victoria is a character who doesn't have that at all, just by, she was exposed, like she's been open as Victoria Dallin, the superhero from the beginning. So we've never seen Wildbow's version of like, what does it look like to be a person juggling two different lives at the same time? Like that's something that I think superhero stories do all the time, right? This juggling between secret identity and superhero identity. And I don't know if these books have ever really explored that. And I think it would be interesting to see Wildbow's lens on that general idea.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if I have a better answer than that, honestly. I think he definitely gets like the first one I can think of is like the space aspect. Like all of the major comic brands have like a space cosmic. They end up going into space at some point.
That's true.
Which you could say, well, there's aliens attacking Earth in this story, but it's not the same. And then you could say, well, that's his take on it. It isn't the same because of course it's not. But I like your answer though, the secret identity one. That's a good answer.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Beard of Valor says, there it is, another Shardrian. What is that?
I don't know.
The facets around here deal with subverted expectations. Feeling safe 27 miles from Goddess and being aligned anyway. Annalise's advice after Foresight dumped her. Carol admitting Amy wasn't well. Matt, as you gaze into moments that were supposed to go a different way, what do you see next to Tex bringing the Vegas team into the Protectorate headquarters? How was that supposed to go? So this is a Weaverdice question. Matt, what was your original plan for what went down in that Weaverdice episode, and how did we fuck that up royally?
Well, okay, I'm not sure what the question. So they weren't supposed to go to the They were never supposed to go turn themselves in. That was just a completely wild ass decision. So there was supposed to be. Okay, you know what? I think I can reveal all this now. Sure.
Yeah, just do it.
Sure, fuck it. They were supposed to realize that Snake Eyes was a terrible leader and Poke was actually going to be a lot more sympathetic, and the other members of Jesus Christ, I've forgotten the names of my own characters because it's been so long. Let's see, the characters at the Jackdaw Sphinx, that gang, the other gang, they were going to all be sympathetic and likable. All of the characters in the High Rollers were giant assholes, and you guys were supposed to be like seduced into wanting to be on the other team and realizing that you needed to betray your original team. And then you were going to just be on that team and bring down the High Rollers. And there were all these NPCs on the other team who you were going to be friends with. and it was all set up for you. That there was a whole thing set up. And instead of doing any of that, you just brutally murdered them like Walter White. And then went to the Protectorate.
Man, we're cool.
Yeah.
Hey Matt, do we want to give a Weaverdice mini update since we're on the subject?
Sure.
I don't know how much there. So we released a new episode this month, but I don't want people to get too excited because that was just an episode we recorded a long time ago that we just never had gotten over the hump and gotten it released. So Matt finally got that done, and it's amazing. We're not done with that world, right? Like
no.
we want to go back to it. It's just a matter of, we had a lot of scheduling issues. There's 4 of us. It's hard to get 4 people together to schedule. It's a ton of work on Matt's behalf. Like he puts a ton of work into those things, guys. The little previously ons at the beginning of the episode, those take like 2 hours to pull the clips and to cut them all together. It's a lot of work.
It doesn't seem like it would be, but like that was why I didn't include it on that last episode, is I'm like, look, I want to do this in a sustainable way. I want to get back in the habit of doing them. I don't know how often, but I really enjoy doing them. I just want to do it in a way where I don't burn out. And that, frankly, I've never said it out loud that way, but that's what happened. Is I burned out. I burned out doing that. It was too much time commitment. It was hella fun. I really enjoyed the positive feedback I got from it, but it was too much work. And so if I'm going to do it again, I'm going to do it in a way that's sustainable. Yeah.
So we are working on that. We are working on making it a sustainable thing. We don't want to bring it back I mean, the thing is, like, we don't want to bring it back and then have it be another 2-3 months, like 4, 5, 6 months between episodes again, right?
Yeah.
So when we bring it back, the goal is to bring it back in this new sustainable format where we can update it regularly, whatever regularly means.
Yeah. And I'm working on the next episode already. So
yeah, we're doing. It's going to be season 2, Weaverdice season 2, same characters, new season.
Yep. All right, final question.
And I think this is thematically fitting for a final question for the Doof Media.
From Piggleston. Ward is pretty heavy throughout most of the story, but there are lots of tidbits or happiness in good times. Do you have a favorite positive scene?
Matt, what do you think?
I mean, it's
tough.
Well, that's like all the things I'm thinking of are actually horribly sad scenes where a character does the right thing, which is not I think what the person means. Like there's a lot of good stuff where like Sveta and Victoria are supporting each other, like very like the stuff where they all go shopping together. I'm going to say some of my favorite scenes in the Parahumans universe involve going shopping because everyone's just enjoying each other's company in a capeless context. Nobody's wearing their capes that they always wear. And it's great.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I think you're right. Like the moments of happiness that are jumping out at me are moments that are actually tragic, but there's like good stuff on top of that tragedy. Like, I mean, just last week, the Candy's speech to everyone that she loved around her is a moment where everyone is about to die. And yet here is Candy giving this beautiful monologue about why she loves all the people that she lives her life with. And that makes me happy.
Yeah.
It's positive in spite of the negative. And I think that's where these books really shine. Like, these are very heavy. They are very depressing. Dark stuff happens constantly. But out of that darkness is light, is happiness, is hope, in some form or fashion. It's not always perfect. It's not always like entirely positive. You can't always go forward with it with just, yes, wonderful, but it is there. And you do have to find it. And that's kind of, to me, that's a reflection of life, that life is often very difficult. It's very hard. It's very easy to get caught up in all the worst parts of our day and our lives and the struggles we go through. But there are moments of pure happiness and pure joy amongst all the shit. And we got to focus on those.
What a poignant way of ending this episode, Scott.
Thank you.
Well, that's all we got for you this week on We've Got Ward. You guys are all part of this show, so feel free to provide us with advice, questions, or thoughts on this week's reading.
Maybe no more questions for a while. That was a lot of questions.
Yeah, maybe just advice and thoughts. Maybe just thoughts.
Yeah, just thoughts. You can reach us via email at gotwormpod@gmail.com or over at our Twitter account at gotwormpod. Next week, we will be doing 4 episodes, and I don't know if I'm going to have time to do my live reads of those chapters, because that's a lot. It's a lot to do in a live read. But if you want to see all the live reads I do of most of the chapters, you can follow us at gotwormpod. My personal Twitter is at scottdaily85, and Matt's is at Mordina Question Machine.
That's right. If you're not already subscribed to We've Got Ward, we strongly recommend you do so and never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else in the world you can listen to podcasts.
As always, you can find all the other shows we do over at our website, doofmedia.com. Doofcast will be off this week, but Do the Right Thing is in their new time, Monday, right? Monday? Yes, Monday. Do the Right Thing will be coming out Monday, so that's 2 days ago for you wacky in the future people. Media MD was new last week. Deep Impact continues to come out every day that a Wild Bow chapter came out. Somehow, inexplicably, I don't know how they're keeping up with that schedule.
They
but
never get sick.
It's amazing. Check out all those shows. You can go to doofmedia.com, click on that podcast buttons at the top, and you'll see all the shows we do, current and former. Check them all out.
Yeah, and unless there was some scheduling snafu, I was on the episode of Do the Right Thing that was released this week.
What? You didn't tell me that?
Well,
That's cool.
I mean, it hasn't happened yet.
You didn't... You told me that. Cool.
And now I'm going to record it. Anyway, this is the future. Or wait, I'm confused. Anyway,
oh my God.
Yeah, if you like any of those shows and you want to support them, consider donating to our Patreon account at patreon.com/doofmedia. You can donate $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. Supporting us on Patreon gives you tons of great bonuses like voting in our fan art contest, like the one that's about to wrap up. Costume contest, which really is going to start getting into the swing since it's almost October.
Yeah, we're going to launch that probably the next episode when we're back, because it'll be October.
Yep. Hangout sessions with us. There's one of those this last Friday. So it was great. It was a great hangout.
Oh yeah, I watched it all. Yeah. You guys did a great job.
If you had been a $5 patron, then you could have watched the one that we did.
God, we're so good at salesmanship.
Oh my God.
Why aren't we salesmen?
I know. Access to live streams of our recording sessions, not like this one because we didn't do this one live. And our excellent Discord chat. And as always, head over to Wildbow's Patreon at patreon.com/wildbow and donate to him as well. This is his world. We're just playing in it.
You know what, guys? Here in the past, we still need 6 more patrons to get to our magic number to be able to do our Dark Tower podcast. You know, it would be a wonderful gift for me when I come back in the future. Wonderful gift for me would be all 6 of those slots taken.
Yeah.
So by October 1st, guys, 6 people, $6. $6. Well, 6 people giving $1. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We really would appreciate it. Like, we're so close to that goal. I'm so excited about it. I know I keep mentioning this at the end of every show. Sorry about that. I'm going to keep doing it. If you want me to stop mentioning this, you can donate $1 a month to our Patreon account.
Yeah.
But it would be just a wonderful... My birthday's coming up in 2 days from the time you're hearing this. What a wonderful birthday gift that would be.
Yeah. Come on, everybody. Let's make the magic happen for Scott.
I'm really laying it on thick here.
That's good, Scott. Yeah.
Of course, if you cannot afford to donate, we do. After everything I just said there, try to guilt you into something. It is absolutely okay if you cannot afford to donate. We think there's tons of ways you can help us out. I mean, just listening helps us out, but you can also share the podcast with your friends. Share our other shows with your friends. If you think people don't read Worm and so you can't share them that podcast because they wouldn't get it, try the Doofcast. Try Do the Right Thing. Or do you have friends that are writers? Share that show with them. Do you have friends that just like hearing the voices of Australian people? Because who doesn't? Share Media MD with them.
Yeah, that is a major pull.
Yeah. You could really help us out that way. And we really appreciate it. Or you can just go over to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and a review. 5 stars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you can say whatever you want, and we will read that out loud on the podcast.
Yep.
Wow.
And yeah, so please do that. And that's all we have for you this week. And we will be back. Time is too confusing at this point.
So we'll be back in a week from now. Now being not the time we're recording this, but the time you are listening to it.
With a 4-chapter episode.
Yeah, at least. What if there's a bonus chapter, Matt?
Right. Yeah, so will we be out of From Within? I don't know. You probably do, though. Will Victoria burn herself even more? Probably.
You read this last week already. They're all going to know. I did the thing where I didn't replace the ending again,
Will
Matt.
Kinsey doom us all? Find out next time.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
That's good.
Yeah.